everybody. Welcome back to the Noel Casler podcast, episode 128. Thank you for listening, as always. Appreciate all the nice comments. Brought out the old Martin today. Let's get into it, though. I want to talk about love, okay? I want to talk about the lack of love that we're seeing in this country right now for our fellow human beings. People are blindly going along with a dictator, with the worst human being that this country has ever put in a position of power. And he's as bad as anybody we've ever seen in the annals of history that have caused all kinds of grief. And not only that, he's ignorant. He's just dumb. And that's part of his appeal, right? Because he makes people feel better about their own ignorance. He waves a flag and says a bunch of racist shit, and people are like, sounds good, brother. Because they're dumb, and they don't know what they're missing out on. That's the thing about the American dream, is that, it's bullshit for most people. If you're not connected, if you're not well educated, if you're not white, if you weren't born into privilege, it's really hard to work your way up. But there's a middle level where you can have a badge or a uniform, you can do service, you can, I don't mean doing like save a service. I mean, you can join the service, you can have power over somebody else, and you can join a political party that's going to look down on somebody else and keep them down. And you can believe in bullshit, pablum, patriotism, xenophobia, my country wrong or right, America's the greatest country on earth, all this kind of bullshit that I've been watching kids and adults swallow my whole life. People getting a hard-on for the 4th of July don't even know what this country's about. They haven't done their homework, and now they're being led by a guy who doesn't even understand the 20th century. If you listen to his speech or whatever the fuck that was today in the Oval Office, that's a guy who doesn't even understand the basic history of World War II. And to say we won it basically all by ourselves is one of the most ignorant, insulting things anybody could say. We are without a doubt, contributed a lot of heroism, whatever. I can't even fucking talk. I get so mad about this stuff. We obviously, sacrificed a lot to win that war, but we got into it way late. Canada was there way before us, and we did not do it alone. And to say we did is annoying at best, and it's criminal at worst, because the reason we weren't there quicker was because of dudes like Donald Trump back in the 30s, isolationists, these fellow kind of ignorant Americans were like, it's not my problem. We spilled enough blood in World War I. We don't need any more of that shit. Hitler doesn't seem so bad to me. Henry Ford was going over there cutting deals with him. A lot of people thought it sounded just right. The same kind of people that are coming out for Trump right now. And that's no coincidence, right? Because it's always existed in America. There's always been this myth about who we are that doesn't stack up against reality. And often that myth was created by wealthy people, by plantation owners, by industrialists, by people who knew if they could get the indentured servants to resent, the enslaved people, the people of brown and black skin, or Asians, anybody they could look down on and tell this one group, hey, you're better than those guys, so don't look over here, look at them, they're your problem. That's the same thing Trump is doing today. But now it's the global south, it's Mexicans and Latin Americans. And we're torturing people. And half of these fucking dumb fuckers who voted for him are still riding around like it's no problem at all. They're looking forward to the military parade. They're looking forward to the 4th of July. They're not paying attention that David Perdue, just got appointed ambassador to China. Google him. Besides being a senator from Georgia, the dude was the head of the Dollar General. He was the head of a textile company in North Carolina. He spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia, even though he pretended to not know how to pronounce Kamala Harris's name back in 2020, and he also said he lost his Senate seat because they were tampering with the election. Complete scumbag, but from that class I'm talking about. He's cousins with Sonny Perdue, Purdue chicken. He's a wealthy white guy from the South who knows how to talk to shit kickers and rubes and appeal to their ignorance and their racism while he's making bank. And those are Trump's people, Duke University types, like that's still there, and that class of Americans is being emboldened and fertilized in a way we haven't seen in a century. And the people who voted for him are going to be the first ones to pay a price, because he doesn't give a fuck about these people. He's gutting your health care. He's gutting your educational systems. He's going to destroy your infrastructure, and your only job is going to be working as a prison guard or a cop or something. You're going to be protecting the wealthy class, and you're going to be punishing the people that you should be considering your brothers and sisters. And that never ends well. And that's happening because there's a lack of love and empathy. We're teaching young men to be assholes. They sit around and listen to Joe Rogan and all these idiots on the manosphere. They sit around watching YouTube getting all misogynistic. That's not what being a man is. You should respect women. They're your equal. They're your superior in many ways. I'd rather work for a woman than a man any day of the week. And as a matter of fact, in my career, I had the choice to do that. And I was in the talent departments in TV because it was mostly run by women. The dudes were all the directors and producers. They'd throw shit at you and have tantrums and stuff. The women I worked for would be like, hey, you feel okay? You've been working 20 hours. Why don't you go take a break? Go back to the hotel or something, right? And they got the job done, right? But this same kind of like tough guy machismo crap that's being pumped into people now is going to get them nowhere. Not to mention the sexual predation and all this kind of stuff that comes from the top down that Trump is endorsing. Half his cabinet are a bunch of perverts and freaks and drunks and drug addicts, which I'm all of those things, but I've recovered from them. You know what I mean? And I work on it one day at a time. And how do I do that? I have a higher power, right? I think of something other than myself that's probably saving my ass and teaching me how to be a better human being. And I want to do that to stay sober. I want to be of service. I don't want to act out on my anger and my character defects. I don't want to rant on Trump all the time. That's why I'm not doing this podcast that often. I'm not trying to make a buck off this crap. I'm trying to just speak my mind, and I get enough comments that it might help somebody, so I codependently keep doing it, right? But I'm watching my country disappear before my very eyes. I'm watching people suffer, and it's only beginning. It's going to get so much worse, and I don't think people realize the kind of corruption that's going on, you don't get out from under. Trump's made $3 billion, $2.9 billion, okay, in 6 months, since he launched his meme coin and Melania's meme coin, and they did this world digital liberty Bitcoin thing that these companies that they've gone in business with, they're putting money in the Trump family's coffers like they've never seen before. And that's what this whole thing is at this point. The government is just a big grifting tool for Trump. And the more chaos, the better. That's what the tariffs are all about. He's just shaking down foreign countries, and I'm going to put tariffs on you unless you use Starlink. So he's making sure his buddy Elon gets a piece. You do business with us, I don't break all your merchandise. It's simple mobsterism, and that's all Trump has ever been. He's just a two-bit money launderer from Queens. He's dumb. His dad was dumb. They're both racists, His kids are racist. They're just the most unremarkable people you've ever met. If I could tell you anything about them, if you took anything away, understand that. And understand Trump is really sick and deviant, so he stood out in a family of mediocre, unremarkable people as exceptionally twisted. And they kept that a secret. Just like the Kennedys did with RFK Jr., though it was hard to keep that a secret, but he got away with it because he had a fancy last name and he had money. So he was insulated from the horrible things he did. White privilege, wealth. Because you want the ruling class. You got to protect them. If you don't protect them, what's going to happen to us? And if they find out about all the shit we're doing to everybody, that's the game. That's the gig. And we have to get out from underneath that. And how we do that is by opening our hearts, by expanding our awareness and our ability to love. You're not going to beat them with violence. You just never do. It doesn't work that way. And they got control of the military now. And you're going to see the crackdowns that are coming this summer. And a lot of people aren't going to have a stomach for it. Right? But love is pervasive. Love will go under a locked door. Love sneaks through windows in the middle of the night. Love touches hearts and changes people. And I'm not just talking hippy-dippy shit. I'm talking about love for all of humanity. Not an attachment. I don't mean romantic love. I mean, what are you here for? What is that breath coming in and out of your body every day for? What are you gifted with, whatever it is that illuminates a soul and a body and a spirit? What is the purpose of that? What is the purpose of the clouds and the skies and the birds and the animals? Why do they care for each other in ways that we seem unable to? I got these geese that sit out in my yard all day and they eat the grass. They sit out by the pond and eat the grass. When one's eating, the other one's sitting there alert, looking around. And then they switch off, and they don't even have to talk to each other to do it. It's weird. You know, I put out bird seed, a bird finds it, it starts singing and telling the other birds, hey, dude, come get something to eat. Humans, you know, we hoard that. We try to keep hey, I don't want the blackbirds coming over here. I'm scared of them. It's insane. Just think of racism alone. If anything has hobbled us, it's that, right? If we hadn't been so stupid and ignorant towards our fellow man, our fellow Americans, nobody would catch us right now. We would be so far ahead of the rest of the world in every way. We would be unstoppable. If we were like, come on, you know, build up your life, build up your family, build up your education, build up your skills, opportunities for everybody. Get on board. We got plenty of room. People would be so loyal to this country. They would work so hard. They would be so imaginative. They would use their ingenuity and their spirit to solve half the world's problems. And that's exactly what we need now, because the problems are so complicated. They're so complex. Climate change, global, you know, economies where little kids are, you know, making iPhones, and they're trying to bring that here, you know. The plastics, all the crap that we consume, is killing the planet. So some idiot can make a buck and do what I just described. Buy a political candidate. Make sure you can never get out from under their wealth. The wealthiest Americans, like the top 1%, made like a staggering amount of money in 2024, like $2 trillion almost, just in the top wealth holders. That is an imbalance that you'll never get out from under. You won't recover from that. You're just going to be working for those people the rest of your life if we stay in that sort of model. Or we can evolve, you know? We can move beyond this. And how we do that is, you know, I don't have all the answers, but how we begin to do that, I should say, it's we be the best versions of ourselves we can be. You know, we expand our capacity to love and care for our fellow man, and that's available to you any minute of the day. You don't have to wait around to be helpful, to be of service. You have to just tune into life. You know, I got infested with ants a lot this time of year. I'll walk out on the deck and there's ants everywhere and stuff. And if you accidentally step on an ant, for me, it's the worst feeling in the world, because the other ants freak out. They come get the injured or the dead ant and they carry them off, and it's just like, it's cataclysmic in their world, and it makes me feel horrible. And it only happens when I'm unaware, right? When I'm aware of life and it all being, you know, around me and working to my benefit, I feel tuned into things. And there's still so much of that in the world, but we're being led astray by technology, by phones, by all the crap that we consume in terms of information, new media. There's no new media. People aren't journalists that are online. They're just scamming you for a buck. That's what it is, you know, and you could lump me in with that, but I'm not telling you to sign up for me or any of this shit. I'm not telling you breaking. I'm not a reporter. I know some reporters. I've had some pretty successful reporters in my family. I've been around media my whole life. I didn't go to journalism school. I'm not giving you any information about politics, you know, that I can take any claim over. I'm speaking my mind on some things. You know, I'd like to point out things that are obvious, like Mark Carney in the White House yesterday in the Oval Office, which looks like, you know, Imelda Marcos's shoe room, you know, where she beds her manservants or something. It's the most garish, ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Completely Trump's taste. You know, he's got the taste of, you know, like, I don't even want to get involved in that. You know what I mean? But Mark Carney handled him brilliantly. And I'm jealous. I'm jealous that, Canada has such a smart, sensitive leader once again. But like, he was like, basically, you're an idiot, dude. Canada's not for sale. Just like Buckingham Palace. And Trump's like, ooh, I like Buckingham Palace. And the owners tell me it's not for sale, meaning I'm not in charge. Neither are you, dumbass. The people are. That didn't even occur to Trump. It doesn't even occur to Trump that the American people don't want him picking a fight with Canada or Greenland or Panama. He thinks, oh, I won. I get the spoils of my victory. I own America now. I own everything in the White House and everything our government does, and that's how they're behaving. They're robbing you blind, brothers and sisters, robbing you blind. And there's going to be nothing left when this is over unless we figure out how to stop them. And to stop them, we need a revolution. We need a spiritual revolution. We need to pick up where we left off in the 60s. Everybody kind of went into the 70s and 80s and cocaine and technology, and everybody got rich, and we kind of forgot about getting back to the garden. But we need to get back to the garden. We need to get back to nature. We need to get back to the essence of who we are. And it doesn't mean you need to leave the cities or anything. I mean, from a holistic point of view. You're just organic material walking through life. You pass another human, that's another dude in the same or woman in the same circumstance. How do you relate to your fellow man? Do you relate to them with an open heart, with love, or do you recoil? Do you react from a place of fear? Do you think God put everybody on the earth to hate each other, or whatever you want to call goddess, God? I'm not speaking religion here. This is not what I'm talking about. Okay, we got enough of that. We need spirituality. We need a consciousness and a transformation of our consciousness and awareness, like a revolution of awareness. And the good thing about that is you don't have to become a cardinal or a pope or a priest or an imam or somebody to achieve that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's available to you any moment of the day. You can wake up right now. And the easiest way to do it is to just become aware of yourself and the present moment. It's always right now, right? If you're like me, you spend half your time regretting what you did in the past and worrying about what's happening in the future. That's my basic state. I'm not preaching to you like I'm free from that. I'm in prison from that kind of thinking. And I have been most of my life, but I work at it every day. I work at, chipping away at the iron doors of my own ego with my little file. That's what all these instruments and stuff are there for. They're just trying to get me in the moment. You can't see my place, but there's paintbrushes, there's pens, there's something where I'm just trying to express I'm here in this moment. And when I do that, when I successfully do that and get out of my head for a second, I get in to my body. I get into my presence. And I get out of my own way. And that's where clarity comes. That's where wisdom comes. That's where thoughts come that let me know that everything might be okay. That everything might just be a test. It might be an opportunity to change things. Not that there's anything good about this. There's horror everywhere right now. We might have a whole new horror in Southeast Asia if Pakistan and India escalate this situation. And while that's happening, Trump is rage tweeting about his resentments, about Joe Biden, about 60 Minutes, about all these stupid things. If you're in AA, he's like a newcomer who doesn't shut up. He's why you don't let newcomers talk a lot of the time. He needs a sponsor. He needs recovery. He's got nothing but junk and garbage in his mind, and he's acting out on it every day. And the world is crumbling around us. Shit's spinning out of control. We got a drunk at the Secretary of Defense at the Pentagon. Jet fighters are falling off of boats, off of aircraft carriers. We've lost 2 in the Red Sea in a week. Boats, planes just falling off the side of the damn ship because there's so much incompetence. How do we have incompetence in the American military? Because they're attacking DEI. They're attacking wokeism instead of focusing on the weaknesses we need to address. We should have the greatest, most skilled armed forces in the world. And for the most parts, we probably do. But they're getting those people to hate their fellow soldiers, because the branding ideology is homophobia, is bigotry, is racism. because you're being led by these white guys who tattoo some Latin shit on their forearms and think they're warriors for Christ. What the hell is that? The reason we were great is because we had a separation of church and state. You could come here and do whatever you wanted to do and love whoever you wanted to love and worship whoever you wanted to worship, as long as you obeyed the common rules, the rules of the road. Don't hurt your fellow man. Don't cheat. Don't lie. Don't steal. And all those rules are being thrown out for industry, for big business. A lot of what I think about in this era is like, I try to focus on the little things a lot of the time that a lot of people aren't trying to talk about necessarily, at least when I'm in my own head and on Substack, Noel's Notes. But like the kind of corruption that's happening that's really going to damage us is not the sexy stuff. It's not the stuff that's grabbing the headlines. That's just Trump being an idiot. He wants to walk in the store, flop on the ground, pretend to have a seizure while his boys go around the counter and empty out the cash register. That's always been Trump's MO. He knows he's an idiot. He knows his hair looks stupid. He knows you're going to laugh at him. He doesn't care as long as you're talking about him. That's all he needs, right? But the weasels around him know how to fill their pockets, and that's what's happening now. And what I fear is the things that are going to happen as a result of the EPA being dismantled and an idiot like Lee Zeldin running it. Those are the things that you're not going to hear about now, and the problems that are going to stem from them aren't going to show up for 5 or 10 years. Trump will be dead and gone when someone's kid starts getting cancer, and you'll say, well, what happened? Why were they dumping arsenic in the river? Well, because there was no more rules. It was America first. It was big business. That's all that mattered. And people cheer this on. That's the worst part, the most obscene part, is that he gets people to cheer their own destruction because he's been able to bifurcate the American dream. It's us versus them. It's red versus blue. That's not how it's supposed to be, because that's an illusion, because we're all in this together. The right hand is fighting the left in any circumstance, right? I mean, I'm just talking domestic politics now, but he's doing it to the whole rest of the world. It's the worst thing a leader can do is divide a people. The best thing a leader can do is bring people together, because if you can harness the talents of all humanity and get them to work under one umbrella, you're golden. Especially if you incorporate nature and animals and learn to care for animals and the planet, and all the flora and fauna on it. That's when you're cooking with fire, man. And that's what we need now. We need all hands on deck. We need people to figure this shit out, because it's spinning out of control just from an environmental standpoint. And it'll be too late. It's already kind of too late to do anything about it, right? Like, the world is not getting cooler. It's only going to be as hot as it is right now. If we shut down all fossil fuels tomorrow, it would stay as hot as it is. It's not going to get cooler again, but we can stop it from continuing to heat up. And that'll, be the difference as to whether we survive as a species or not, essentially. And that's hard to wrap your head around. And they don't want you to wrap your head around that. They want you to think about Elon Musk taking people to Mars, or Jeff Bezos taking his little dick rocket, taking Katy Perry into outer space. I've worked with Katy Perry a bunch. She's no astronaut. Okay? I'll just put it. I did Super Bowls with her, presidential inaugurations. More power to her. My buddy was her roommate in L.A. before she was famous, and she would get in the hot tub topless. I'm not trying to get all... He had a famous father. But anyway, what are we talking about here? Space exploration for celebrities, billionaires, and their ego. Rocket trips to Mars or to the, outer space. It's just stupid. We got to save this planet. We got to save the people on it. We can't let children starve, which is going to happen all over this world. You think things are bad now with xenophobia in terms of immigrants? Wait till 10 million people are upended from their home countries, and they have no choice but to migrate north, because that's going to happen. It's going to happen all over the global south, and you're not going to be able to stop 1 million people coming over your border. So what are you going to do about it then? It's much better to prepare for it, to meet the problems where they arise, to use our vast wealth and the knowledge that we had before we just dismantled the United States government and USAID and all the things that, provided soft diplomacy and technology around the world. It was much better to pump money into that and go try to deal with these things on site than to just wall ourselves off from the rest of the world and say, drill, baby, drill, and you don't need a government. Just leave it in my hands and buy my crypto and whatever. Okay, I'm off to the golf course for another 3-day weekend. Here's some tweets and some memes about how much I'm kicking ass, And people buy it. They're so blinded to the corruption. They're so jacked up on Fox News and Rush Limbaugh and Joe Rogan and all these fucking morons that are just picking the meat off of your bones and your children's bones. And you're going to be living in a rusted out trailer, in a town with a meth lab and a tattoo shop and a gun store and no public education. How do you think that's going to work out? What do you think that's going to look like? It's going to be dystopian, and that's where we're heading. That's where we are half the time already in a lot of these American cities. And I understand people are pissed off about that, feeling left behind, but you missed the big play in the 80s. You missed the big play when Ronnie Reagan was doing this to you. You don't have to miss it again. You're missing it big time now, but you don't have to. And I know people that listen to this podcast are not missing it. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but that's what I care about. I care about an awareness of what we are really up against. And it's a cultural phenomena. It's a lack of cultural sophistication and education. To have these people, these Trump voters, turn on immigrants. Most of these guys work with their hands. Most of the Trump voters I know ride around in pickup trucks and work on a job site. And they're the union guy who gets to operate the backhoe, right, who digs the big ditch. But then all the other laborers come in and do the real hard work, the nuts and bolts of it. And those are often immigrants. And you're getting a good deal out of that situation because they always work their ass off. You always underpay them. They're obviously much more skilled than your average American workers in a lot of cases. Because a lot of Americans are entitled. They want to be above that, and that's fine. That's how it's supposed to be. You rise up. But, these guys are experts, and you're dissing them. You're punishing them for coming here and working hard. Work in a restaurant sometime and let me know who makes that run, where you're going to get your best line cooks from, You can't talk to Anthony Bourdain anymore, who was my neighbor in New York, in Carnegie Hill. I never got to meet him. I loved the guy ever since Kitchen Confidential came out. And if you've read that wonderful book, he's got a whole chapter about how this one town in Mexico had the best line cooks he'd ever met. And he just couldn't believe the skill level. So he traveled to this town to meet these people. And he would basically import them to come work in restaurants. It's that way with horses. I live in a horse town. Ask anybody, ask a billionaire. There's a few of them in my town who have all these stables. Go look at who's taking care of those horses. And I'm not talking shoveling shit out of a barn. People do that too, but I'm talking skilled, skilled like equestrians. That's who's taking care of the thoroughbreds. You watched the Kentucky Derby last weekend? Where are all the jockeys from, right? From Argentina. They're from Venezuela. They're from Mexico. They're from all these places that you're punishing. Why are you punishing people that are just as capable, just as intelligent, just as hardworking, and oftentimes better educated than we are? Why are we punishing them? Think about it if you're a MAGA guy. Think about, what did somebody like that ever do to you? Did they ever do anything to you? Or did you hear about something on Fox News that some smarmy frat bro told you about to get fear into your heart, There's crime all over the place. There's a lot of crime, because of poverty, because of a lack of education, because of addiction, because of all the things you inherited from your idiot votes and from not learning that you need to take care of people, that social services and, Social Security and food stamps, and public assistance and all these things are good things. These are not bad things. In a proper society, you take care of people. If you don't take care of people, you don't have a society. You have a mafia state. And that's what we're going to be. It's going to be like Russia. And half the people won't even know they live in a dictatorship. It'll be 2 states. There's a guy who was a German. I can't think of his name. There was an op-ed in the New York Times that talked about it last week. Haeckel? I think it's Haeckel, right? He was a German guy, and he talked about the sort of 2 Germanys that existed, you know, and like there was people blind to the horrors that were happening that didn't really understand they were living under a dictator with Hitler. And it's going to be the same way with Trump. There's going to be guys like, I don't know what you're talking about. MAGA's great. He's kicking ass. I keep hearing he's kicking ass. We're having a bigger fireworks display this year than last year. I got an extra bumper sticker on my car. You know, it's all good. No, it's not all good. You're just being fed propaganda while your rights are being stripped from you. And when you figure it out, it's going to be too late. And you're going to be so scared. You're going to be so shaken with fear because you've had it so easy for so long, whether you think you do or not. You did have it good, you know? Now you're going to see what hard times are really like. Go talk to your buddies in Russia if you think Putin's okay or he's really not that bad because you heard about it on Tucker Carlson. Go see how they're living. You know, people still have outhouses in Russia. Okay, if you're not a friend of Putin, you're fucked. And it's going to be the same way in this country with Trump. And that's the opposite of what America was supposed to be, right? We're supposed to be the land of opportunity. If you were willing to come here and work hard and get an education, you could work your way up. We all know there was all kinds of, you know, slippery ladders involved in that. And there was all kinds of protectionism and country club elites and the Ivy Leagues, and there was all kinds of ways to ensure that there was a ruling class, right? But there was a bare minimum basic like level of a life that you could probably achieve in America, where even the poor people had it better than most. That's all going to change. You voted that away if you voted for Donald Trump. And you're about to, you know, really feel the results of that. The tariffs are kicking in this summer. It's going to be a long, hot summer. You know, you're not going to have products on the shelf. And we're not given to being altruistic when stuff hits the fan. Many of us are, but a lot of Americans aren't. We saw that in COVID. People were hoarding toilet paper, you know. They weren't looking out for their fellow man. They were looking out for themselves. Got to get mine. That attitude doesn't serve you. You have to expand your heart, your capacity to love. You have to tune into a higher purpose for being here. Otherwise, what's the point? To get a couple cars, a big house, buy some fucking shoes, torture a bunch of animals you don't even think about, living in a factory farm so you can have cheap cheeseburgers and stuff, you know, so you can eat poison. This is not a vegan rant. I'm just saying, like, people consume crap because it's the lowest common denominator and you're not paying attention to it. You know, you're being exploited, and you've been exploited forever, especially for the better part of a century. Right? But there was an opportunity to carve another path, and those paths are being plowed over, and you're going to have tanks, you know, in American cities. The little military parade that Trump has planned for his birthday, the estimates I've heard can go up to $100 million for that. I don't believe that it'll be that high. But I went to one, and whatever it is, it's too much money, is my point. You know, I don't have the actual fact of how much it's going to cost, but say it costs somewhere between $10 and $100 million. That's absolutely ridiculous. I went to a parade in 91 when I lived in D.C. It was led by Norman Schwarzkopf, Stormin' Norman. It had 8,000 troops and tanks and all this kind of stuff, and it was the end of the Gulf War, the first one. It was a big victory celebration, and it was bullshit, and it was stupid, and Bush won or lost the next year. You know what I mean? And we were back in a war with the same country a decade later when his son got a chance to take over. You know, not even a decade later, the end of the decade, right? We're not a country of big military parades, ticker tape parades when we win something big. You know, a canyon of heroes, fine. But not this, like, serving the dear leader, North Korea, you know, Putin-esque Red Square kind of bullshit with tanks and, you know, guns. And it's just stupid. It's not who we are. And look, those MAGA guys are going to eat that shit up. People love that. We're a generation raised on Rambo and all this kind of bullshit. You know, you're not going to get that kind of taste out of like the American people's mouths, and that's fine. I'm not trying to turn everybody into hippy dippy bullshit, but you don't want those tanks turned on you. You don't want those weapons turned on you. And Trump tried to do it in his first term. When there was unrest in 2020, he wanted to shoot protesters in Lafayette Park across the street from the White House. That should have been the end of his presidency right there. When he was hiding in a bunker from his own fellow Americans, from college students who were sick of the abuses that anybody with a brain knows law enforcement has perpetrated on black and minority Americans forever, since the beginning of time. I mean, it was the first job of cops, was to beat up slaves, you know? Enslaved people, right? They were hired to crack heads in New York City and stuff. Like, that's, you know, there's some good cops, there's some smart cops, and there's a lot of really racist cops. And as an institution, they all come together when something bad happens. You know, the thin blue line, or whatever you want to call it, that attitude has metastasized in America to the point that it's really dangerous to be out on the streets or driving a car if you look suspicious to a cop and you're a young black man or an older black man or a black woman. And it's disgusting. It's disgusting. And I've seen it my whole life, and it makes me sick to my stomach. And I've known a lot of cops. I've had friends become cops. All the ones I've known are kind of racist. I've known some have grown out of it when they saw the real deal, but it ain't pretty. And people know that, and they were waking up to it, right? And it wasn't just, you know, African Americans marching this time. It was everybody. Black Lives Matter. And it freaked Trump out, because what it really was an assault on the attitude that he perpetuates, right? That white guys and cops and badges and flags are what you need to honor and respect. And it doesn't matter what somebody did, because it was one of the others that they did it to. So why are you even outraged? Why are you even complaining? That's what he wanted to shoot in Lafayette Park that day. He wanted to kill the germ of love that was sprouting in people, right? The seeds of a transformation in our consciousness and how we treat each other and how we police this nation. That's what they wanted to tamp down. That's what he was yelling at General Mattis. Well, just shoot him in the legs or something. Teach him a lesson. This must not stand. That was the desperate gasp of a racist. And that should have been the end of him, right? Or 6 months later, when he sent his goons to attack the Capitol, it should have been the end of him. But it's so pervasive. It's so generational. It's so handed down. And it's so much a part of the firmament and the societal makeup of suburban white America that it didn't wash out. It'll take generations to wash that stink out, and they want to flip the script. They brought it back. They don't want any DEI. That's why they're back, right? They're attacking institutions. They're attacking law firms. You know, they're attacking anybody who would teach you that equanimity and equality and civil rights belong to every American, regardless of their creed or the color of their skin or their sexual orientation. That's what they're attacking, because they don't want an America where that exists. They want to protect the sort of brutality and mediocrity that a few at the top can exploit for their own gain and their own power and their own profit. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And if you go along with that, you are participating in the destruction of this country and everything you pretend to love. Period. That's why he's going after the Kennedy Center, right? And all the arts organizations in Hollywood, because he wants the culture to reflect his same myopic racist views, right? And if he gets away with all this, he wins in a way, right? Because you're raised on that. You don't know any better. He's going after PBS. He's going after Sesame Street. He's going after Mr. Rogers. I was born in 1971. You know, I was sat down in front of PBS. Single mom, dad was gone, lived at grandma's house. I remember my grandma sitting me down, you know, on a carpet, on the 70s shag carpet. Said, watch this guy. He really cares. You can learn something from Mr. Rogers. He's a smart guy. And what did Mr. Rogers teach us? If you're in my generation, he taught us everything. But he taught us how to control our emotions. He taught us how to love our fellow man. He taught us how to be kind. And that felt good in a world that didn't look kind. Those were important lessons, you know. And Trump knows that. He knows what that represents, and he wants to kill it. He'd rather have kids listening to fucking Joe Rogan or something, watching UFC. You know, I met Mr. Rogers. I think it was 1997. It was the Daytime Emmys, and it's a show I used to do, and he was honored in New York. Got a, Lifetime Achievement Award or something from the Daytime Emmys. Mr. Rogers, right? So it was an amazing event and stuff. It was amazing to be in the room with him, and that was made basically like soap stars and stuff in the rest of the show and Oprah. And we had these town cars that, you provide. So they'd come out and they'd get in a limo and they'd go on their way. When Mr. Rogers was done, he came up to me and he said, I'm not going to get in that black car. Can you just get me like a cab or something? He didn't want the fancy car. He wanted a cab. And I said, yeah, no problem. And so I said on my little radio to my buddies that were working with me, I was like, let's get a cab for Mr. Rogers. And now this is the end of this show. So everybody's pouring out of Radio City. There's cops everywhere. Like it's a tough time if you know New York City. Like a show's emptying out into the streets of New York. It's just freaking chaos, right? So I get a bunch of my buddies and we run out to 6th Avenue and we can't get any cabs to stop. They're all off duty. And finally I basically throw my body in front of a cab that's trying to make I think it was a right onto 51st Street or 49th Street or something. And I sort of throw myself in front of this cab, and I stop, and it says off duty, and I go around to the passenger window, and the guy rolls it down. He's like, what are you doing? Let me go, And I said, look, I need a favor. I work on this TV show. I got a celebrity in here. I need to get him in your cab. I need to get him out of here. And he goes, who is it? And I said, it's Mr. Rogers. And this guy's eyes got so wide. He was from, Africa. He had this mellifluous, beautiful accent. He goes, Mr. Rogers? Mr. Rogers? It would be my honor. It would be my honor. And he got out of that cab, and he opened the door, and I told my buddies, bring him out. I got a cab for him. We brought him out. We put him in that cab. He thanked us all, smiling, shook our hands, thanked the cab driver. This guy was beaming. Thank you, thank you. The driver was like, thank you, this is my honor. Put him in the cab, he took off. Made me tear up, made us all tear up. Because love is universal. That's an American export. That's a beautiful thing. That traveled, across continents to a continent that we've only abused in the worst possible ways. Right? That guy had every reason to be resentful about everything about America, given his history, of colonialism and who he was here in this country working. And he could see what love was, He was honored to drive Mr. Rogers, a little PBS show for kids, right? It's not a little show for kids, right? It's part of what's best about us, teaching love, empathy, inclusiveness, We can do that. We're great at that. Our art is great. Our music and culture are great. I talk about it all the time. You look what the African American community has given us. We've abused them since the beginning of their origins in this country. What do they respond with? Jazz, literature, science, art, athletic achievement, academic achievement, hard work. Not everybody needs to be some big famous guy. You can't all be like Louis Armstrong or Michael Jordan. Hardworking, backbone of this country, same as you and me. Why are you hating on him? Why are you legislating against him? Why aren't you saying thank you? I'm sorry we made it so hard for you. Let's make that better right now. And let's not make the same mistake again to another group of people. But that's exactly what we're doing. And this time we're doing it without Mr. Rogers, right? Without empathy, without plays, without August Wilson playing at the Kennedy Center. His plays. I saw Fences on Broadway when I was in high school. James Earl Jones came out, changed my life, brother. I went to drama school 4 years later, or whatever, however many years later. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe the power that one man could project onto an audience, and the beauty and poetry of a play that was going to teach me about the struggles of somebody who didn't look like me. And I was going to walk out of that theater different, changed. My heart would be touched. Look at Hamilton. More recent example. I worked on the Tonys for 20 years. It's coming up next month. A month from this weekend, actually. I don't do it anymore. Last time I did it was with Bruce Springsteen. But, not to name drop. But I was there the night Hamilton won. And we were actually, we were in the Beacon, because the Garden was under renovation, or the Radio City was under renovation that year. A few years we had to do it at the Beacon Theater. It's owned by the same group. Madison Square Garden owns Radio City and the Beacon. You don't need to know all this, do you? So we did it at the Beacon, which is a much smaller thing. So there's an alley kind of on the side of the Beacon. And we didn't have a big backstage area. And when they were winning every award they were up for, obviously, and when they'd come out in the hallway and people would start crying, these performers, it was just amazing, It was just amazing. And, the guy who wrote the thing worked on Tony's with us before. He was sitting in our production office writing stuff. If you ever watch the one where Neil Patrick Harris did this incredible opening, he wrote that opening. Whatever. I always forget a name. I've met him a million times. I can't think of his name from the Heights and stuff. But anyway, that's what you want. You want things to evolve and include more people and infuse things with more talent and more light and more rhythms and more spice. That makes us all richer and better. The girl who played the Schuyler sisters, one of the Schuyler twins, wonderful actress, I can't think of her, Renee Gooseberry or something. And we had them sing at the Super Bowl in Houston the first year Trump in his first term, like his first Super Bowl when he was in office. And I just remember like the feeling of horror, in the arts. Like it was the first example of like, man, this isn't working out the way we thought it was gonna. You know what I mean? We're not going in the right direction for it. And that looks like child's play now. That first term, I don't think back then when we were worried about what this meant, for our country and our cultural institutions, we could have imagined where we'll be now, where he's shutting them down. If you've read Noel's notes or you've seen me live, you've heard me talk about the Kennedy Center Honors, and that's how I started my career. He's destroying it. Mark Twain Prize, last one just went to Conan O'Brien. There won't be any more. They're not going to give it out unless they're giving it to some, hack MAGA comic. The last one of those I did was with Bill Cosby, so. And I used to go watch him tape The Cosby Show. And when I was in high school, my grandfather worked for MSNBC, or not MS, it didn't exist then, NBC. He was a computer guy. My step-grandfather, Vince, who doesn't listen to this podcast, but he's a lovely man. He's 94 right now, and he's probably watching TV to see who the Pope is next. And he loved Pope Francis, and so did my grandmother. And my step-grandfather was a Jesuit priest before he married my grandmother, as I've told you before. And they spent their lives in service to other people. The whole Jesuit philosophy was how you improve the world is educating people, right? You educate the poor. You educate and feed the poor. And that lifts all boats. It's not a bad philosophy, right? It's certainly not something you want to turn your back on. We're turning our backs on humanity. We're turning our backs on the best versions of ourselves in favor of what? Darkness, brutality, ignorance, violence, isolationism. And Trump's not really an isolationist either. He's taking money from all over the world. That's what all these, Bitcoin, meme coin, whatever you want to call it, all these cryptocurrency scams that he's running, that's what it's for. It's so you can put money directly in his pocket. You can pay him bribes. That's all he's doing. He's just looking to collect bribes. I got the power. I'm going to shut everything down unless you pay me, and then you can play ball. Simple as that. It's simple mobsterism. He's a thug, you know? But the whole world's going to pay a price this time, and we have to stop it because our lives are short, right? No matter how long you live, it's the blink of an eye, okay? So we're trying to keep the ball in the air for the next generation, and we can't let it hit the ground. We can't, because it's going to be that much harder to pick it up again. It's incumbent upon us to do all we can to stop this. And I know it's tiring. I know everybody's weary. I know people want to check out, but we can all do something. You remember when I started this podcast, I told you the idea I have about life is that, like, if you ever look at a fish swimming in the river or something, I have a river back here behind the property. If you watch a trout or something and the sunlight gets through the water and hits the scales, you see a rainbow, right? Each scale on that fish has a different hue that it reflects when the sunlight hits it. It's all one organism, but there's purple, pink, red, green, brown, all these beautiful different colors. And they make one organism that flows through the water and reflects the rays of the sun and the beauty and the nurturing aspect of this planet. That's what we need to do. That's it. You need to think of this as one organism, right? And right now there's a cancer eating away at the soul of this nation. Okay? But the disinfectant, right? The antidote to fear and ignorance and anger is light. It's love. It's love for your fellow man. Not a love between you and me, a love for all humanity, right? As Stevie Wonder said to me. And for you guys who don't know that story, come see my live show and I'll tell you. But, you know, that's it, man. That's the deal. That's the gig. You're here to love. And I don't mean you got to run and fix all the world's problems and love everybody. You got to start with yourself. You got to clean house. You got to get rid of the things that are getting in your way, that are cutting you off from the sunlight of the Spirit. You know, because they want you to not do that. They want you to be consumed by the anger and to check out, you know, and just let them be in charge. Don't do that. We have to look at everything as an opportunity, and we have to understand we're given a strength. You know, when we need the strength, it will be there for us. And anything that makes you feel good, music, art, painting, color, cooking, gardening, listening to birds, petting your cat, playing with your dog, you know, watching your TV shows, whatever it is that helps you tune up your spirit, do it. Tune up, man, because we're a symphony, you know, and we need every chair filled to play this next part of the score, okay? And we need a conductor who understands the tempo and the rhythm and how to get people to work together and play in concert with each other. I use that analogy a lot of a symphony because it's one of the most beautiful things humans do. The amount of skill and the amount of like working together and the amount of listening to each other and getting out of your own way that is involved in a piece of classical music, you know, being performed with a full symphony. It's mind-blowing. Every time I see it, I can't even believe people can do this. I can't believe people ever developed enough skills, you know, to do that. And there's a reason for that. It's a metaphor for life, and it makes you feel better. You know, you put a couple dancers in front of it doing some ballet, and I'm gone, right? And all that is being cut, right? All that kind of arts education and funding is being cut. It's not minor. It doesn't not matter. It matters more than you think because you really need the arts. You really do. As you know, if you listen to this podcast, it's been a theme of mine the whole time. This is why. This is what I was worried about. This is what I was talking about because in the people I know who've fallen for the Trumpism, they're the least exposed to that. They've had the least amount of exposure to the performing arts, to literature, to theater, And most of that shit's been dumbed down so much that when they are exposed to it, it's just a jukebox musical or some kind of dumb shit. It's not something that challenges you. You need some stuff that challenges you. You want art and books and literature and music that makes you think. You don't want just background music. You want something that'll, change you on a molecular level in a way and give you the strength for the road ahead, give you some wisdom. Because half of that shit is coming from a higher place. Ask anybody who really creates something great. They're going to tell you. It came from beyond them. Talk to Paul McCartney. He's like, man, I just showed up at the piano and Let It Be came out. He was thinking about his mom, or he had a dream. You get out of your own way. You're a conduit. You have to show up and do it. You have to be ready for inspiration to strike. I'm not taking the craftsman out of the equation, but the best of it is coming from a universal place beyond us. And you all know what I'm talking about because when you feel it. If you're a deadhead or whatever, you've been at a great show, that's because the audience is involved in it. Or a great sporting event or something. Something happens where the overall energy sort of becomes one. It shifts and you all become pointed towards the same goal. It's like that fish reflecting the rainbow. That's what you want. You want to work in concert. You want to realize you're not alone, that you're loved and supported in this world, And there's going to be some safeguards to make sure you don't suffer too much. Then they're all being ripped away. Healthcare, pediatric cancer. I mean, the things that they're doing are just, mind-boggling, right? But it's up to us to change it. We can't turn our backs on it. We have to accept it. We're here now. We got to figure out how to get out of it. We do that with each other. We do that by tuning in to each other, by helping each other, by being patient with each other, by being loving to each other, and not, I don't want to say when they go low, we go high, right? That's a cliche, right? But we can't give in to the anger and the darkness too much, and we can't let people sort of rage farm us, and we can't get addicted to the daily outrages, because that's what Trump wants. He just wants you to talk about the latest dumbass thing he said and not pay attention to what his boys are doing in the back, right? Anyway, that's probably enough out of me today. I'll put a link to Noel's notes for anybody that's watching this. If you want to subscribe, it's free. All my content is available free, but the people who do the paid prescriptions make all of this possible. Thank you for listening. Thanks for all the support. You can listen commercial free to this on Patreon. I think it's like $5 a month. You can share it on YouTube or whatever it is. You can do whatever you want. You should just love each other more. I'd like to give a special thanks to everybody who's listened to this podcast through the years and from the beginning. I know it's kind of a quirky one. It's a little sloppy. That's kind of how I am. I like a sloppy track, as they were saying at the Kentucky Derby last week. It's been raining the whole time I've been doing this. Metaphorically, and we're in the mud now, but we can do this together. We can run our race. Thank you for listening. Until next time, peace.